Rory MacDonald will be making his PFL debut on April 29th, 2021. It feels like a lifetime ago since his barn burner fight with Robbie Lawler, and it cemented a legendary fight. However, since his fight with Lawler, MacDonald hasn't seen the success he once had, as when he was considered Georges St-Pierre's natural successor. And that could be because Rory MacDonald is from an era gone by. My name is Julian Lung, and this is a quick breakdown on Rory MacDonald. The best way for me to describe Rory MacDonald is a fighter with many tricks but few methodologies. At his best, MacDonald is a masterful workhorse who will double and triple up the jab in order to bait a response or to dull the senses. He's taken a lot of what made GSP successful, wherein establishing a dominating jab can open up a variety of attacks, but he doesn't quite have different ways to apply the concept. MacDonald approaches every fight the exact same way as the last one before him. He almost always comes in on a straight line, feinting the jab and trying to get his rhythm going. This works when he's against fighters that can't close the distance very well or struggle to disguise their entries. Against Woodley, the most predictable of his opponents, MacDonald understood that Woodley only entered in exchanges and in flurries. So all MacDonald had to do was to pump the jab while coming forward to bait out the telegraph strikes and then fill up the space when Woodley would inevitably leave. MacDonald knew that if he could keep his output consistent but not overwhelming, Woodley would be content to maintain the space in hopes of landing a takedown or a right hand. What resulted was MacDonald racking up a dominating position, and that would set the precedent for beating Woodley down the line. What made MacDonald so successful was his understanding of attacking and defending. One of the earliest concepts you will learn in striking is taking turns. Basically, if your opponent attacks, you should ideally be returning with offense, and they in turn will return to match it. Tristar is an example of a gym that attempts to exploit the return in level changes or counter-striking. Rory is a prime example of this principle, which by applying low commitment feints, he can draw out the strike and counter it. But when I said Rory MacDonald is an era gone by, this is precisely why. By applying your offense in a way to draw a commitment, you pigeonhole your possibilities. You're waiting for your opponent to make offense while not applying your own. It is very unlikely for MacDonald to apply the pressure early or even at all. His positioning is almost always at the edge of punching range, looking to make returns. And against Robbie Lawler, his usual jabbing hand was taken away by Lawler's hand fighting. Lawler also uses in and out footwork to constantly force Rory to reset his stance to meet him square on, and that allowed Lawler to mix up his timing and go in on strikes. While Rory had some nice ideas, such as mixing up the rear snap kick with the rear head kick, without his range and tempo setting jab, he was left struggling. What made me the most critical about Rory's style was his fight against Stephen Thompson. It's no secret that Thompson is an extremely difficult puzzle to solve, let alone shut down. But Rory's approach was a clear indication that a singular approach to generating offense is now a step behind, or at least fading out into the distance. Against Thompson, Rory hung out at the preferred range, which gave Thompson the perfect distance to bounce in and out and to check his lead hand. Since he couldn't jab again, Rory could only enter on his right hand, or flat out kicking into range. Both of these aren't great options, as Thompson, being the faster and longer fighter, could easily skip out of range and fire back. However, due to Rory's methodology, he isn't the kind of fighter to set his feet, come forward, and throw low kicks. So what ended up happening is Rory coming forward, eating strikes, and then rushing in on flurries and missing out on opportunities. His wrestling game was completely nullified because his opponent wasn't coming onto him, and he had no real way of setting up his wrestling exchanges unless his opponents came towards him. It was a shockingly disappointing fight, and his last one in the UFC. Combined with his mental lapse and his recent performances, Rory MacDonald is a shell of his former self. His fight against Douglas Lima played right into his preferred method attack, with Lima throwing singular strikes along the fence which gave Rory all the right reads to keep him there. And against Paul Daly, it was a repeat of the Woodley fight, where Rory could easily feint Daly into making a big overcommitted strike and then take him down and control him from there. Against Gegard Mousasi, without being able to establish the jab, Rory was constantly forced to fight on the back foot and to wait for Mousasi's bigger strikes. Those strikes never really came, and as a result Rory was on the end of his strikes, and as a result Rory is constantly at the edge of Mousasi's striking range, and eventually his Imanari roll landed him in trouble. Given his combined fight mileage and appreciating style, I find it difficult to believe that Rory can make another stellar run, this time in PFL. This might be a difficult pill to swallow, and especially one for me given the close proximity of Tristar to my home, but also the relationship I developed when I grew up watching MacDonald. On April 29th, I'm not sure if Rory will be the same mental scape as he did so many years ago, let alone have the wherewithal to have shored up his deficiencies. He's certainly one of the most cerebral fighters, and while he isn't the athletic genius that GSP was, he had one of the widest tool belts in MMA. And with that, I leave you to the possible resting place of the Red King, Rory MacDonald.